Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion about investing and scaling in fintech, the case of Tipalti. My name is Isabelle Finger. I'm the MBA on 9D, and I'm the director of the INSEAD San Francisco Hub for business innovation. So today it is my pleasure to welcome all of you for this webinar organized by INSEAD Digital and the San Francisco Hub. We have a panel discussion with Oren Zeev and Chen Amit about their own adventure with their firm Tipalti, and it will be moderated by Gopi Rangan. Gopi is the founding partner at SureVenture. SureVenture is a VC firm based out of Silicon Valley who invests in early stage startup. When we invest with a mission to enable peace of mind. He's also the host of the Sure Shot Entrepreneur podcast and teaches entrepreneurship courses at INSEAD. Gopi, over to you.
Hello. Thank you very much, Isabelle. And thanks to everyone at INSEAD, the administration and everybody else for creating opportunities like this where we can all learn from each other. I'm Gopi Rangan. I'm going to be your moderator today. Let's get to the first slide. You must be familiar with George Doriot. I believe today will be a very proud moment for George Doriot. We have two classmates from INSEAD who started, collaborated, and have built a business that is likely to be one of the most successful startups founded by INSEAD alums. But let's talk about George Doriot for a little bit. What he did was absolutely phenomenal. He was a pioneer. He was the father of venture capital. The reason why he is called the father of venture capital is that he was one of the first investors in a startup with the mindset to create a company that will last very long and create a huge opportunity for lots of jobs and also economic benefits. And that type of mindset didn't exist before he ventured into this. And one of his first investments was Digital Equipment Corporation. He's also the founder of INSEAD. He started venture capital investments with a few philosophical principles. The first was that invest with patience, invest long term. Do not expect to generate returns in the next 2 to 3 years. The second principle was that let's not depend on banks for debt. Let's focus on equity. Let's try to generate and create value for everybody. The next principle was that he wanted to invest with companies that have founders with whose personalities, he called them good people. So can we invest in founders who have good people? That kind of has evolved into INSEAD's philosophy of using business as a force for good. He had a principle that investors, venture capital investors, play an important role, a hands-on role in helping founders, not just being a passive investor. He, of course, had the priority to generate profit. This is not an endeavor that is a nonprofit venture, and that is also important, but he primarily focused on generating profits. This is an endeavor that eventually creates to positive economic value that has a multiplying effect. And lastly, and probably the most important was, he said, diversification across the board is important. If George Doriot were to come back today and look at the $300 billion of venture capital funding that has gone into 10,000 plus startups in the past year, I wonder whether he would agree with many of the VCs and many of the founders that have joined the ecosystem. But today, well, let's go to the next slide. Today we have many startups founded by INSEAD alumni that live up to these principles. There are lots of success stories among us. Out of all of these things, out of all of these startups, Tipalti clearly stands out. Tipalti is on track to be probably the best, the largest success story coming out of INSEAD, company founded by INSEAD founders. Let's go to the next slide. Tipalti automates the entire payments payables process. This is an industry that's archaic. It's a legacy industry with very little technology. When Peter Zemsky, Vikas Agarwal, Laura Healy, and I came together to write this case, we were really interested because it was a story about two founders that were classmates and they built a company together. But slowly, as we discovered, as we interviewed more and more people about the case, we discovered some truly stunning opportunities for growth. There were very, very important decisions they took multiple times throughout the journey of the company. And we're going to talk about a couple of those today. One of those decisions is whether to go through an M&A process. Another decision was whether to go through a funding event with a term sheet offered by an investor that was questionable. We're going to focus on the first question today. And the second question, if we have time, we'll get to it. And if you have questions, please do post through Zoom. And Isabelle will moderate and come back and ask those questions to the panelists later. Let me first welcome Ken and Oren. Please join us.
Hi, Gopi.
Hi, Gopi.
Hello, welcome to the webinar. I'm very excited and very honored to have this opportunity to ask you about Tipalti, the journey of Tipalti. I understand the company was founded in 2010, but the story really goes back to 1994. Ken, when did your friendship with Oren Zeev start? And how long did you know Oren before you decided to launch Tipalti? Tell us about the launch story.
Yeah, I met Oren at INSEAD. I landed that day. I forget what day of the week it was. I landed, put my luggage in the hotel. I think between 5 and 10 minutes from first steps into INSEAD, met Oren in the corridor. I think 5 minutes later, he asked me where do I sleep. I told him in a crappy hotel until I get my house. He said, why don't you come stay with me at my house? So met him. Within 5 minutes, he invited me to stay in his house. Funny story, we both went to the same undergrad school. We spent 4 years pretty much overlapping, maybe sitting in the same classes 80% of the time, but we never met in this undergrad school. But we met at INSEAD, and was the first person I met in INSEAD, and we stayed close friends ever since.
Oren, what was your expectation when you first made the investment in the company? You wrote the first $100,000 check into Tipalti. What did you expect will happen with the company at that time?
You know, first it was an unusual investment for me because usually I do invest larger amounts. I think I had no expectations as far as the business, because at the time we thought this was just a small thing that, you know, we'll just enjoy working together. So really my expectation was just to find a project to, you know, kind of collaborate with Chen on. And that was pretty much it.
So the idea came from a pain that you had experienced. And how did you convince Chen to take that idea and work on it? What was the situation then?
So basically a few months before, Chen told me that he's ready to go back to build stuff. And if I had an idea for him, he's open. And then a few months later, I came across this idea. One of my companies, which was an ad network company, was having challenges with paying out the revenue share of the publishers they're working with. And they try to find an outsource. They try to outsource it, maybe a service from the cloud. There was nothing. And so I picked up. So when I heard about this pain, I connected the dots with the conversation I had with Chen a few months earlier. So I called Chen and told him about this and asked him if he wants to look at it together. And then we took maybe a couple of weeks to look at it together. We talked to a few other ad networks companies just to make sure that my company was not the only one having the issue. And by the way, the results were not resounding yes. It ranged from, I don't know, yes, we have this issue, but it's not a priority. It's nice to have, to, yeah, if you had something, I would use it. It wasn't like people would, but maybe Chen can explain why he decided to do it anyway. Chen.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience because I think the first two dialogues, one with that person from that ad network, and I think the next dialogue was another monetization scheme of sorts for video. That person also said that he needs what we discussed. And then the next dozen probably said, no, not interesting, don't bother, no pain. And I was itching to do something. So I said, you know what, maybe I'll solve just a problem for these two companies. Maybe it's just a project for me or a side project or something like that. And that would be it. And when Oren offered to invest, I actually told him that I'm not sure if it's a company. Maybe it's just a project. Maybe it's just a side gig. Yeah, he told me, you know what, if it's a side gig, take the $100,000 and congratulations, enjoy it. Don't spend it all at once. If it's a company, then it's your first $100,000 into the company. And that was great because I wasn't ready. I knew that when you raise proper funding from an investor, it comes with commitment, right? You don't do it without the willingness to commit for a certain journey. And I wasn't ready at that point. I thought it might be, I was actually excited to have just two customer projects and do it for them. And never in my wildest dreams thought it will be what it is right now. And also the way I started it was with that in mind. So when I started it, I moved back in time 17 years. I was a programmer 17 years before, went back to programming, wrote the code, built the product for these two customers, and evolved from there, and didn't hire even one person for the first year. So, yeah.
For those of you listening to this webinar, and if you haven't had a chance to read the case, it's okay. This is one of those rare situations where you can walk into a class without having to read the case. I hope you get a chance to read the case later. But I want to ask again, how many years of payments experience did you have? Did you have an in-depth knowledge of the industry? What was your level of skill in payments at that time?
Yeah, I like to say that I was the perfect person to start this company because I knew nothing about payments, nothing about ad networks, nothing about business processes, compliance, taxes, a lot of things that have to do with Tipalti. But that was one of the exciting aspects of it, right? To do something new. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to build stuff. I like the challenges, the questions that we need to answer, the riddles that are in starting a company. So yeah, I knew nothing about it. And in hindsight, I think that was really critical for the success of the company. There were other companies, addressing areas of this problem before I started, but they were all coming from a payments perspective, from a payments background, and were kind of shackled by the norms and the expectations and all of that. And I just didn't know any better. So I listened to the customers and went and solved their problems. And that solution happened to be the mix between software and payments, which today is obviously the holy grail of the fintech industry. But I knew nothing about payments, nothing about all of that. I think it was a blessing.
Oren, this sounds quite risky. Where an entrepreneur comes to you and tells you, I'm willing to work on this project. I don't know where this is going to go. And by the way, I have no experience in this space. Does that bother you?
I did not perceive it as a risk. What's the worst that can happen? That we had some fun, we tried something, and we blew through $100,000. At that point, I just did not even view it as a risk.
Is this a pattern with your other investments? Do you typically like to invest in entrepreneurs who don't have a significant expertise in an area? Or is fresh thinking actually a strength?
what I find is that, and maybe it goes in contrast to, maybe it's counterintuitive, but what I find is that people who do not come from the industry often are able to innovate in a much more radical way. And the big disruptors are people that come out of the industry. At least in my experience, it has been the case. I think it has been the case in tech in general. If you think of Airbnb was not started by a hospitality executive, and Uber was not started by a taxi industry executive, and you can go on and on and on. And in my portfolio as well. So I like to use the phrase outsiders to the industry, insiders to the pain. I think it is important that the founders understand the problem really well. Maybe experience it before having started the company. In this case, I experienced it before having started the company. But it helps to come with a totally fresh mind, as opposed to be, more having more fixated ideas about how things should be addressed. But I'm not ruling out people with industry knowledge. I'm not. I don't want to overstate the case.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like a lot of experts, even ourselves, in areas where we know a lot, we begin to think about how an idea can fail, and that often cripples us and that prevents us from moving forward and taking risks. Coming with a fresh perspective from the outside doesn't hold us back, and we are willing to try and experiment and fail, and that creates opportunities. And for creating,
I have another expression that I use, which is, as an investor, sometimes ignorance is bliss, because many times if I'd understood all the challenges in an investment before I invested, I probably would not have invested. But you just jump into the water, not exactly understand how deep the water is, and then over time, you develop your superior knowledge and your competitive advantages. The chances that you would, from the outside, knowing nothing about something, really understand deeply the solution already, there doesn't make sense. Okay, no, you have to probably underestimate the the complexity of the solution, start building, and then find out.
Yeah, for marginal improvements, experts are very helpful, but for revolutionary changes, fresh thinking is necessary. Okay, now we've launched the company, you've decided to experiment, and the project is going well, and you have a few customers. How did you get the first few customers? How did you manage to convince them that they should use Tipalti? Was it difficult, or was it easy in the first few steps?
The first two were relatively easy. It was before even I started the company, and they experienced the pain, and they knew about the pain, as one of them said, better than you do, better than I do. And so they were easy. They were eager to have a product in their hand before I even decided that they wanted to do this. The third and fourth one was from Oren's network. Another was a friend from elementary school. And so these were the first four customers. They were all Israeli customers. And, within the Israeli network, which was great to start working in close proximity in the same time zone, being able to meet them easily. After a year, we decided to double the headcount of the company. I hired one person in LA and doubled the company. And that person was tasked with finding the first few customers in the US, because I wanted to verify whether the problem was very Israeli specific, ad network specific, or it's more general than that. And within months, we found the first two customers. One of them is still among our top 10 or 20 these days. First two customers in the US. It took us a few months to get them live, but they were sizable. For us, they were very sizable at the time and very important, and really confirmed the need and the pain. One of the early Israeli customers was an interesting one. I, quote unquote, won the deal. The CFO said, yes, I want this. And then he said, hold on for a second. A board member asked me to look at another company. That other company was a very established company, probably 6-7-year-old company with hundreds of employees. And they were comparing Tipalti, which was me, versus a company with a few hundred employees. And it took them about a month until they were able to sort things out with the board. And they selected Tipalti. So, that was obviously a great tailwind for me and really made me feel that we're onto something here.
Yeah, when a customer chooses you in a bake-off and you win against a very large incumbent with hundreds of employees, that's a huge validation indeed. But how did you manage at that time when you were just yourself and hiring the first few employees? How did you manage customer support and how did you manage product development?
Development was me. I was developing and I was writing the code and went back in time. I really liked programming. I think it's great. I enjoyed it, but it was many years before, 17 years since I wrote a program professionally the last time. And then marketing, customer. So there was a line you could call into Tipalti, and you could press 1 for marketing, 2 for customer success, 3 for support. It all went to me, and I answered all those lines. And then I made fake names, fake email addresses to make the feeling that someone else is answering the support calls and all of that. But I asked that same person, that bake-off CFO, I asked him, he said, yeah, I know what was going on. It didn't fool me. And I understood that I was speaking with one person. But try to make us look a little bit larger than we were. But yeah, I wrote a website. Silly website, I hope it's not, you cannot find it on the internet anywhere. But yeah, I did what I could do because I didn't know if it was a big company, like if I was going for a company or for a project. So I tried to do everything myself.
It's an incredible story already. There's more to be uncovered soon. Oren, at what point did you feel like this company has potential? It's going somewhere. It's going to the moon. At what point in the life of the company did you feel that and you said that we need to invest more?
I think it was gradual. I don't think there was one point that I went from 0 to 1, but I think, in the beginning, we didn't even feel comfortable raising money from the outside. After a year, when we had a few customers, still very small revenue number, we felt comfortable enough to raise $1 million. So that was from the outside. Well, $500,000 from me and another $500,000 from the outside. So that was kind of a milestone. And then maybe a year later, we had 20 customers say, okay, maybe we can now afford to raise $3 million. I think the one, to me, a big one was there is something called, in our industry, there's something called money transmitter license, which is a very, very painful, inexpensive, multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort to get this license. And we were operating without license legally, but it was limiting in some ways. It made us more vulnerable. And at some point, and I really forget, maybe Chen remembers, I forget when it was in terms of how long after we started the company. At some point, we're faced with the dilemma whether we make this investment. And again, it's a multi-year investment, whether we start it. And at some point, I remember having, not that Chen had the opposite idea, I think we agreed on it, but I remember both of us saying, okay, we got to decide whether we think this is serious or not. If this is serious, we're not going to build a real company without, operating the way we are without the license. So to me, that was a forcing function to decide whether we're serious or not. Do you remember, Chen, when was it more or less?
2013.
2000?
Very early on, 2013.
13, so after 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, after 3 years. It was, I think we committed to more than we ever raised. Like, we didn't understand it, but we really committed. The eventual investment in getting all these licenses was more than we've raised to that point. So it was a major, major commitment.
So Tipalti means we handled it, and by the time you had handled it,
it means I handled it.
I handled it. Okay.
I handled it.
How much did you handle by that time, 2013?
2013, in terms of volume, revenue was in the hundreds of thousands, like maybe $1 million revenue, and processing a few $1 million. Right? So yeah, it was still a small company.
Yeah, it's still early days. There's positive signs, but it's still not a blockbuster yet.
No.
But very
Right.
soon after that, you reached the point where the company was large enough and there was a potential acquisition opportunity. Tell us about the situation then. What was going on at the company at that time? What was on your mind? Where was the situation of the company?
Yeah, we were doing very well. We grew. We probably doubled revenue from around 3 million to around 6 million in revenue. That was the time between 15 and 16. That was the growth. We were about just $5.5 million revenue company in 2016. Late 16, this acquirer reaches out to me, asks me if I'm interested, saying, no, not interested, thank you. And then started in March 17, or February, March 17, started fundraising because it was time for us to go through another fundraising exercise. That same acquirer was interested again, acquiring, still I'm not interested. Offered them to participate in the funding round. They took on the offer and engaged. And shortly after, they came back and said, the corporate VC said, I was told not to proceed. It's only about an acquisition. Please explore whether, will you entertain an acquisition offer from us? And I said no in a span of 3 months, 3 times to the same company, just because I wasn't interested. I was building a company. I was happy with what I was doing, was enjoying what I was doing, and wasn't looking to sell. But they were persistent enough, and we decided to. Obviously, Oren was in the mix of things, and we decided to engage other important shareholders in the discussion. And that shareholder really convinced me that I should explore this. He had all kinds of logics why I should explore this. And one of them was, it would be significant. You're depriving your employees from a great outcome. It's generational. It would be generational money for me, myself. Like the word generational was just so big for me. I'll do generational, and it's such a big term. And eventually convinced me to explore this. So that's where we started around the beginning, Q2 of 17. We started exploring this with this acquirer.
Oren, when you first invested in Tipalti in 2010, you call yourself a non-institutional investor, and you were investing mostly out of your own investments, and you would raise a little bit of money from others, whoever was interested. But by the time 2016 happened, you had already invested. You had created a fund, and you had invested through the fund. How much had Tipalti raised, and how much had you invested in the company, and were you having fun?
For sure, I was having fun with Tipalti. The rest is more vague in terms of my memory, the details, but for sure I was having fun. Yeah, you're right that until 2015, I was investing my own money. I would invite other people, but I wouldn't invest their money. I would just invest my own money. And in 2015, I made really accidentally, because I wasn't planning it. I made the change to also raise money from the outside. So by the time of these events, I did have a fund. I actually do not remember if I already invested from the fund in Tipalti or not at that point. I think I didn't. I think my first, I'm sure I didn't. My first investment from the ventures, anyway, I hadn't invested from the fund. I did have the fund. what was the question? How much did I invest in Tipalti?
Yeah, how much had you invested?
Just at that point, it was just a personal investment, maybe a little bit, over $1 million, but that's just a personal investment.
What was your thought process then? What was your advice to Ken? The M&A transaction that was brewing.
I did not want to. The price tag was very high in terms of multiple and revenues, even by today's standards, and certainly back then. And it was more than we were worth at the time. We knew that it would take us a couple of years to grow into this value. So from that was not the issue. So at that point, I did feel that we can build something big. I did not see a ceiling at that point. And when you have something that you have an opportunity to build something really great, that was my argument, and you're having fun, then why sell? Why sell? But that was my opinion. I was going to respect whatever Chen wanted to do because I had many other investments. I would not take the moral responsibility of preventing a sale and then things go south, and then I just wouldn't take the moral responsibility for that. So from my standpoint, I'll support whatever you want to do, but I really don't think we should sell. And yeah, it will take time, but over time we'll get, we'll get there. We'll grow into this value and more. Was my argument.
So for me, while I was writing the case, we had encountered 4 or 5 situations like this, and this was a very pivotal moment. It was eye-opening for me because these are the kind of stories that need to be told. And when you just read TechCrunch and news articles, you don't get to see the full story. Now we're beginning to go behind the scenes, and we're beginning to see what really happened at that time. It was a dilemma. You could have gone either way, and nobody could have faulted you. Ken, if you were to kind of summarize the pros and cons, I want to launch into a poll and ask the audience what they would do. What were the pros and what were the cons?
What were the pros? I'll start with the cons. The cons were that I really enjoyed what I was doing. I was just having fun. And I actually thought, okay, so if I sell the company, what would I do? Like, let's do it. I would want to start another one, right? This is what I would like to do. So that was the major con. The major con was that this is what I planned to do. This is what I wanted to do. So, why the hell sell? The pros were along the lines of what that investor said. The outcome would have been phenomenal, like just ginormous. Yeah, I would have, I don't know, around $100 million, right? So it's just an endless amount of money, and I could never think of that amount of money before. Declaring victory, making many people wealthy. These were the things. I was not looking forward to working with that acquirer. It was one of those. It's a great brand and really reputable and I think highly respected, but I never worked for a large enterprise, so not looking forward to it. I was willing to commit if I needed to, but not looking forward to it. So the pros were more monetary, the cons were more emotional.
We know the answer, what really happened at Tipalti, but there are a few hundred people listening to this. Let's go to the poll and ask them, what would you do? And the response is continue to negotiate. That seems to be the highest here. The audience seems to be convinced that there is something to be had here. What did you decide at that time? And what was the number one reason for you to say, yeah, we're not going to go through the acquisition?
Yeah. So it took a few months. It's a large enterprise.
And you actually, that was not the decision, right? The initial decision was to take the offer.
We engaged with them. Yeah, we engaged with them and continued the due diligence offer. Yeah, it wasn't a term sheet or something. We actually engaged with them and went through the process. But then at some point in time in the process, they needed yet another 4 weeks or something. And that was just the last straw. and I was already too deep in my. I'm not saying it just to say it. I really was in the fence. I really was torn between taking it or not taking it, negotiating more. It wasn't about the money anymore, right? So if I get 100 million or 200 million, the money is irrelevant at that point in time. It was really about enjoying and believing in what I was doing and wanting to build it bigger, and just being fed up with that acquirer and deciding that we need that I had enough. So we decided to let go and to go back to fundraising, and we took a 6-month hiatus from what we're supposed to do, and go back to that and continue building the company.
Oren, were you happy with the decision at that time? What was your solution for this? How could Chen manage the liquidity event, still be able to move forward, but take care of himself and his employees? What was your suggestion to him?
Yeah, again, our initial decision was to do the deal. Luckily, they dragged it so much, so long that that luckily Chen changed his mind and decided with the heart instead of with the head. Because initially he decided with his head, and then switched to their heart when they dragged it so long. So I'm very grateful for the potential acquirer, because I didn't want to do it from the get-go, but I was committed to support Chen. When that moment that we decided, or that Chen decided, okay, enough is enough, and we're continuing independent. At that point, I was obviously very supportive, but at that point, we only were left with, we were in limbo for several months. So to some extent, our sales growth suffered because we didn't hire new salespeople. And on top of it, we had maybe 2 or 3 months left of cash. So we were, maybe strategically, the company was doing well and we were happy. The business was going well, but tactically, we had a big challenge because we were with our back against the wall, needing to raise money, not having enough time, and having, a few months that were not, great in terms of growth, because of the distraction of this thing. So basically, we just went, we knew that we should just raise as quickly as possible. And then, by the way, part of the raise was, I saw how difficult it was for Chen to say no, because it was so much money, and said, okay, I think it would be a good idea that if we can, as part of the round, we would also, if we can, provide significant liquidity to Chen so that we're more aligned. So next time, he doesn't feel so compelled to sell, because he's not gonna be so excited about just money. So I think that's when we went to work very quickly. We had a sense of urgency that we needed. We could not optimize for the fund. We cannot optimize for the valuation. We just needed to raise very, very fast, basically, at that point.
The lesson here is for corporates that embrace speed. And speed is not something that
for corporates, for sure,
they lead with. Yes. If you want to acquire a company, and if you want to get the best entrepreneur to join your team, you got to move with speed before they switch out of their brain thinking into emotional thinking and walk out of the deal. In December 2017, for all the reasons that Oren just described, your back was up against the wall. You could have been a near-death experience. You might have run out of cash flow, and fundraising was very important. You got a term sheet. What was the situation? Describe the term sheet. What happened there?
One other item, just to give Oren credit for something that happened in between. When we started engaging with that larger enterprise, we were running out of money, and we actually couldn't complete the process with the amount of money we had. And Oren, despite objecting to the deal, provided a bridge loan so that we can go through the process. And so just another, just to emphasize but when he supports the entrepreneurs, he supports the entrepreneurs. So I went back on March 17, when I was fundraising. I had 3 term sheets, great term sheets from 3 different funds, paused it for this acquisition exercise, and went back to it in Q4 of the year. Went back to the same 3 investors. I think I got the 3 term sheets back. I'm not sure if it was all 3 or 2 of the 3, and we selected one of them. Went through signed the term sheet, went through the definitive agreement, and we're working on it. And then within a span of, I think, 2 days, I got 2 phone calls, Oren got 2 phone calls from different people telling us about red flags with that investor. At that time, the company had no money, and we had a term sheet for, I think, $30 million or $35 million. That was, again, at the size we were then, that was life-changing for the company. That was just an incredible amount of money, and was taking us to a different level. So that was a really, that was a scary, that was a challenging moment. What do you do? Like, really, it was, and Oren knows that I'm very critical about investors, and I think after the first message I told him, he said, okay, be patient with that. But after the second, third, and fourth, we understood there was a red flag there, and we decided to explore it. We actually went back to that lead investor and discussed it with him, and he offered us to speak with the references about the situation. We did, and it didn't come pristine, right? It came, the feedback we got was iffy, but we felt that we can protect ourselves through the agreement. We can structure it in a way that protects from. And we proceeded with the agreement, and then literally in the last week, like it was the last of the red lines. Like there was nothing yet we agreed on everything. That's it. The last iteration of red lines. I needed. There was one term in the agreement that said that it was a first close on that week, and then I had 30 days, I think, for the second close. And having been through that year and being away from the business and distracted by so many other things than running the business, I just felt it was wrong. I needed to give myself a little bit more time for the second close. Who cares? Second close in 90 days. Like, what's the harm in that? And I thought, you know what? I need to ask that investor. Like, I called my lawyer and asked, do I need to ask the investor for approval? He said, no, you have a majority in the shareholding, like whatever. I didn't need to. And then I called Oren and said, I think I'll use it as a test. And Oren said, forget about it. I'll put all the gaps. I'll close the second closing immediately. But I thought it was a good test, just to whatever red flags we had from that investor earlier. That would be an easy test, like a test they cannot fail. The investor cannot fail that test. It's too easy. I asked him for an extension, something he shouldn't care about. He's not losing anything. It's just common sense. You need to let the CEO run the company. Nothing that just. And I asked the investor, and obviously he failed the test. He just, provided the worst answer with the worst approach and dialogue. And it was just a horrendous experience for me. Reached out to Oren. Now, at that time, reached out to Oren, told him that that was the outcome. And Oren said, we're not going to work with these types of investors. I'll take the round on me. And in a snap of a finger, like he can make decisions, and no other funds can, made a decision to take on that round and leave it.
Can you didn't have the upper hand in the negotiation. You were operating the business with a bridge from Oren already. and yet you made a very bold move to walk away from the term sheet. Now, Oren, kudos to you. Kudos to both of you for making this unbelievable. This to me, it's like watching a movie. Oren, this is why I call you the sage of Silicon Valley. You are a true friend to an entrepreneur. It was a very bold move on your part to double down at that point and say, I'm going to lead the round. And you made a very swift decision. I want to get to very quickly get to the end of this. So we have a lot of questions waiting already, but I really want to touch on this.
I'll answer it shortly. Yeah. First of all, it's important to understand that when you take an investor, people say it's like marriage. No, it's worse than marriage, because marriage you can divorce. In these situations, you cannot get a divorce. It's like a Catholic marriage. So this thing was such fun for us, and we built something what we thought was a jewel. And just now to invite someone that we are just not gonna suck all the fun out of it, we just wouldn't have it. And you're right, it was a big risk, not because so much of the investment. The investment I thought was very, very solid. I didn't see it as a risky investment. The reason why it was risky is because I had been the founder and because I was using LP money. So the optics could have looked bad if it went south. But I decided to take that risk. I did have a couple of conversations with my major LPs to explain to them what I'm doing, so that I don't surprise them and why I think it's compelling. I did feel very good about the deal. That was not the risk. The only risk was the perception of my LPs that I was compromised, maybe my integrity, or maybe it was too biased because it was my company and I used the money to bail out the company. That was the risk. But in hindsight, of course, I did them a great favor. It's an amazing investment for them. So yeah, no, I'm very glad that we decided both. And by the way, Chen, he was supposed to get, in the original deal, was supposed to get a very large liquidity event for it personally. He gave it up as well. So both of us made these, if you will, sacrifices, but in hindsight, both of us won big thanks to those quote unquote sacrifices.
It was a big career risk for you at that time. It was, and you still did it.
Yeah.
I want to welcome back Isabelle so she can manage the Q&A now. But Chen, Isabelle, please join us again. Chen, where is the company today? What kind of transaction volume are you managing? What's the situation? What's the future?
Yeah, we're doing extremely well. We are processing at the rate of $20 billion per year, growing almost 100% year over year. One of my investors is the former CEO of Twitter. He has the phrase, "You're defying gravity." We're accelerating the pace of growth while growing, so we're doing extremely well. To the best of my knowledge, I'll challenge the audience. We are the company with the best retention rate on planet Earth, with 1% gross dollar churn, 99% gross dollar retention, and 30% net dollar retention for anyone who's familiar with those terms. We're getting close to 500 people. We'll be close to 800 by the end of the year. Setting foot in the UK, in Canada, obviously a large office in California and in Israel. Firing on all cylinders, just doing tremendously well.
What an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing lots of insider details, which typically doesn't get out in other places. Isabelle, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Gopi and Oren and Chen. So I think it's a wonderful illustration that success is not a straight line between point A and B. And thank you for sharing the big decision at some of the crossroads. Chen, you just said a few words about the future of the company, but I was curious because with the pandemic, a lot of companies spoke about resilience, reinvention, adapting business model or operations. So is there anything that you have changed in the company because of COVID and that you will keep after the pandemic is over, hopefully soon?
Obviously, we changed to work from home. So like all other companies, and we've been very successful with that, like many other companies, I think. Will I keep it? I might be forced to. I'm not a fan of it. I'm a fan of in-office work, of collaboration, of meeting face-to-face. I think the market might force me to flex a little bit, so we'll see. But yeah, work from home is one of those. Other than that, as a company, we did very well through COVID. Obviously, we're enabling digitization of the office of the CFO, which is critical in these times for CFOs in mid-market companies that used to push papers and sign paper checks and all of that. That's non-existent for them today, and they need to digitize. They need solutions like Tipalti, providing financial control. Won't give the full pitch, but COVID gave us some tailwind. Some of our customers are in gaming, monetization, ethical gaming, monetization, marketplaces. So many of our customers seen great tailwind through COVID. Some of our customers less fortunate, but all in all, we did very well through COVID. But I must say we changed the messaging a little bit, which we will change back once COVID is behind us. This was a COVID-specific messaging about the challenges of the CFO under COVID, which I think we'll be able to switch back to growth when it's all said and done. So yeah, these are the things that we have to change.
Okay, thank you for that answer. So now I want to deep dive into the questions. So the first question from Frances is, what do you think the major skills you brought to the venture that has led to the success, or maybe the skills that, if you didn't have them, the company wouldn't exist today?
I think two basic skills. I think product management, just being a thoughtful product manager, listening to the customers, crafting the product well. I like, when I speak about product management, it's really important to not listen to the customers sometimes. And even that first customer, that company that first introduced the problem to us, at one point in time, they were strongly opposed to a critical design decision that we made in Tipalti. I felt more strongly that they were wrong, and was willing to go all the way to the end and to actually lose them, my first customer, if I had to. So I think product management and just product skills are one thing. In today's Tipalti, the second skill is really critical, and that's managing complex systems and being comfortable in complex setups, right? The product is complex, the market is complex, the company is complex. So I think all my career I've done complex systems, and I feel comfortable in that environment. So I think these are kind of the two of the... And the hiring, I think I hired a great executive team. Yeah, these three skills.
Okay. Oren, do you have another vision of those skills that made it
I have no skills. My only skill is, to choose the right people and give them money. So.
And Oren, you said as an investor, sometimes ignorance is bliss. Frances asked how important does luck play as a role in success, in your opinion?
Huge role. Huge role, including Tipalti. Chen can probably, talk about certain places where, for example, I'll give you an example from Tipalti. So the only reason why we're able to serve our customers is because we're able to connect with the systems of Citibank, which I'd introduced. Now, in hindsight, now that we understand the business, it's crazy that they let us connect to their systems at that time when we had nothing. It just makes no sense. We just lucked out. We lucked out that I knew someone, and we lucked out that I don't know what they were smoking that day, not day because it was a process, but so without this very specific lucky event, and that was really almost pure luck. Of course, you have to seize the opportunity, right? And of course, we needed to not mess up later and all that, and do the connection all right. But the fact that we even got the opportunity, and without it, there would be no Tipalti, because we wouldn't be able to handle any customer, right? Without the connection to a backend system. And there was no alternative, by the way. When we just, the first one we tried was Next, and was City. And then a year or two later, we said, okay, we can't have a single point of failure. Let's work with others. We couldn't, It took us years to get the second one. So huge role, I think, luck plays in these situations.
Okay, thank you. Thomas is asking, lots of new startups. From an investor perspective, what should we look at to choose the right one to invest in? And how to identify startups which maybe scale up in the future? So what is the magic solution?
Yeah, maybe I'll take that. I think that you wanna, at least I wanna get a sense that the customers are not well served already by existing solutions, and that there's no clear ceiling. I also try to get early indications, if possible. Sometimes don't exist, but early indications that there is a real, from customers, that there is a real need, a real pain. And even in the case of Tipalti, we had nothing, but we did take the time to talk to 10 or more customers, get the answers, decide what we accept and what we don't, but try to address real pains that are not well addressed by others. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but that's like given the time constraint, that would be the first thing I would say. Okay.
Thank you. The last question that interests a lot of people, it has been upvoted a few times, and then I wanted to keep for the end. Apart from finally meeting each other at INSEAD, how does studying at INSEAD benefit Tipalti?
How does benefit Tipalti? So I came to Tipalti, to INSEAD as an engineer. I don't think I've met a customer before I came to INSEAD. I don't think I met a marketeer even. Product people probably. So for me it was eye-opening, and I learned a lot. And I think one of the key things I learned was that to be very analytical and to really not make quote unquote strategic decisions. Just be very thoughtful and very analytical in those strategic decisions. So for me, INSEAD was really critical for moving me from being an engineer, a developer, to thinking business and analyzing the business. So for me, that was critical learning for INSEAD. But the network is probably more important. Meeting Oren and Oren, Tipalti and all of that, that was critical.
Okay, thank you, Oren.
Yeah, I was also an engineer. Not only that, I worked an engineer, developer at a research center. So not only did I never meet Chen, a customer, I never met anyone who did business, prior to and also I come from a family where everyone is in academia, so also never knew anyone who had a business. So, and I wouldn't have the break. Just getting into the venture capital industry early on in my career that allowed me to build myself as an investor, build the wealth that I had in order to invest in Tipalti and meet Chen. So, all these things, were just any one of those things you took away, Tipalti would not have been in existence.
Okay, thank you. On this good note, time is over. So I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you, Gopi, for leading that amazing conversation. Thank you to the INSEAD team in the background that made it happen. And thank you everyone for being with us today. See you soon in one of our next webinars. Bye-bye.